As we continue our look together at different relationships, different kinds of people that come into our lives, we're kind of just examining all these different types that Proverbs identifies. We've looked at wise people, and of course the whole burden of the book of Proverbs is to call us to wise living. The Lord wants us to be wise. He wants us to live according to His ways. He wants us to live in the fear of Him. The Lord wants us to live out practically, and that's what a lot of Proverbs is about, just practical living. The Lord wants us to live very practically with wisdom, even in the common everyday events of life. And so the wise was our first group of people we looked at. Secondly, we looked at the wicked, those who are not walking with God. As a matter of fact, it is their design, their desire to live evilly, to live wickedly, to ignore godly wisdom, to go about things their own way, and to bring trouble often, not only to themselves, which they don't do by design, but trouble to other people. But in their wicked living, things tend to boomerang on them, and they live out the consequences ultimately of their own foolishness and wickedness. So that's another kind of person. It's the kind of person we want to be aware of and stay away from if at all possible. At least be alert to them. Now he's turning to a third group, maybe a middle ground here, between the wise who are walking God's way and the wicked who are intentionally walking against the will of God. And that is the group that is called, we might call the naive. The naive individuals, as found in chapter 1, he says concerning them that these are the people he's writing to. He's talking to people that are naive. And by naive, we're talking about individuals who should know better, who maybe have some understanding of the things of God, but for whatever reason, they haven't processed these things in a proper way. So they're not taking the wisdom of the Scriptures and the wisdom that God has given us in life and appropriated it to their circumstances very well. They have not learned how to do these things. Maybe they weren't ever raised that way, because remember, much of the Old Testament, much of Proverbs, goes back to home life. Are the parents teaching their children how to live in a proper, wise way? And if they're not teaching them even the practical things of life and the godly things of life, then we can't expect that most people are not going to be living properly. These are the naive people. And much of the burden of this book is towards that individual middle ground people, inviting them to a better way of living. As a matter of fact, there's a number of ways here. In chapter 8, verse 5, for example, the wisdom calls out to the naive and also to the fools. Look at 8:5. It says this, "O naive ones, understand prudence, and O fools, understand wisdom." So in this chapter, we're looking at wisdom being personified. Some thinks that this is a personification of Jesus himself, of Christ, who is the embodiment of wisdom. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but at least we get the idea. This is the wisdom of God, and wisdom personified is calling out to naive people. And it's saying, listen, come and follow me. Come my way. Don't go the other ways. Learn from me the wisdom of God. And also, fools are here as well. And fools, as we've seen throughout the book of Proverbs, are those that are spiritually foolish, usually, and have rejected the ways of God. They don't want to follow the ways of God. Sometimes they're fools in the sense of the practical issues of life that they don't grasp. But either way, they're foolish people, and wisdom calls out to them to follow her and to walk in the ways of wisdom. So wisdom is calling out. Wisdom calls out to all of us. God in his wisdom calls for us to not be naive, not to be ignorant of the things that matter, but to understand and to increasingly understand the wisdom and the way of God. In chapter 14, verse 15, wisdom once again invites the naive. Verse 15 says, "The naive believes everything, but the sensible man considers his steps." So he kind of contrasts two groups of people here. The wisdom, he says the naive believe everything, so they're easily taken in, they're easily deceived. But the sensible man considers. He takes steps of wisdom that we've been seeing here, and he understands, he analyzes very carefully. Going all the way back to chapter 1, verse 4, we pick it up here. He says that he's written this book to give prudence to the naive and to the young youth knowledge and discretion. In verse 22, how long, O naive ones, will you love being simple-minded? And so he writes to these individuals, and he's saying, look, don't stay in that state. To some degree, we're all born naive. And as young Christians, we're all naive to many things. But we don't want to stay there. We want to grow in wisdom. We want to grow in the knowledge of Christ. We want to grow in the knowledge of the Word and move from being naive to being wise and making certain we don't fall into the trap of the wicked. So we've had the three groups now, and those three groups we have looked at as the ones that are wise, the ones that are wicked, and the ones that are naive. And now we'll look at two more yet this week. I hope you can stay with us for these studies.